Support for today's episode comes from Amazon. Amazon is working toward a carbon-free energy future, doing more with less, investing where it matters most, and supporting communities where we operate. Commissioning crews now delay finished grid projects. Commissioning crews are the last-mile delay for finished grid and data center projects. A project can clear permitting, secure equipment, and finish construction on schedule and still sit unpowered for months because the specialized crews who test and certify electrical systems before energization are booked elsewhere. Commissioning is the final verification stage before an electrical system goes live. Transformers, protection relays, and switchgear all get tested against design specs to confirm the substation or facility will behave as expected once it is energized. It has typically been treated as a routine closeout task rather than a scheduling risk. That assumption is breaking down as the same commissioning specialists needed to energize a new data center are also needed to bring a utility substation online, and both projects are now trying to hit their in-service dates at the same time. The result is a category of delay that shows up only after the harder-to-see risks, equipment lead times, and construction labor have already been managed successfully. A facility can be fully built, with transformers installed and switchgear in place, and still wait months for energization because the qualified testing crews needed to sign off on the system are committed to other projects. For a facilities or operations team, that is a different kind of risk than a late transformer delivery, because it surfaces at the very end of a project when the budget is largely spent and the in-service date has already been promised to tenants, regulators, or corporate leadership. Why commissioning talent is a narrower pool than general construction labor. Commissioning work requires certified technicians trained on specific protection schemes, relay settings, and utility interconnection standards, a skill set that takes years to develop and does not scale the way general electrical labor can. A region can have ample construction activity and still lack the specific commissioning teams a high-density data center campus or a major substation upgrade requires, because that expertise sits with a small number of specialized firms and utility crews rather than the broader electrical trades workforce. When project timelines compress industry-wide, as they have across grid, data center, and manufacturing construction simultaneously, commissioning capacity is one of the first specialties to run short, because there is no faster way to produce a qualified commissioning engineer than there is to expand a factory's transformer output. What happens when buildings are finished, but the grid connection is not? London's commercial development market has already produced a visible version of this problem. Multiple developments across the city have reached full construction completion, including internal system commissioning and fit-out, only to face permanent grid energization timelines stretching years beyond their original handover targets, according to reporting from London Construction magazine on the city's substation backlog. The buildings exist. Internal systems have been tested. What is missing is the final utility-side energization step, a bottleneck that planning approval and construction completion do not resolve on their own. The same dynamic is emerging in U.S. markets where equipment delivery has already forced schedule changes. Even once a transformer or turbine physically arrives on site, it still has to be tested and certified before it can be energized, and that step has its own separate queue. Why data centers and utilities are competing for the same commissioning crews. Data center developers have historically treated commissioning as a fixed, predictable phase near the end of a construction schedule, staffed once the building is substantially complete. That approach is increasingly unreliable when utilities pursuing their own record capital investment programs are drawing from the same limited pool of qualified electrical and protection testing specialists. Grid equipment shortages have already shown that data center demand and broader industrial and utility demand draw on the same constrained supply chains rather than separate ones. Commissioning labor follows the same pattern. A utility substation upgrade and a hyperscale data center campus are in practical terms bidding for the same crews to hit overlapping in-service dates. How facilities teams can avoid discovering the gap too late? Reactive hiring for commissioning roles, brought in only after a schedule risk becomes visible, tends to produce the most expensive outcomes, according to workforce research from Broadstaff Global on critical facilities staffing. Teams pay overtime premiums. They bring in third-party crews unfamiliar with the specific equipment. Documentation gaps open up that create their own downstream compliance exposure. Facilities and project teams that build commissioning staffing into their planning at the same stage they reserve equipment and construction crews, rather than as a close-out afterthought, are positioned to avoid the specific failure mode now showing up across grid and data center projects. Fully built and still waiting to be turned on. Facilities teams already navigating permit and interconnection queue risk should treat commissioning crew availability as a fourth-line item alongside equipment, labor, and permitting, not an assumed constant that appears whenever construction happens to finish. Capital availability and equipment delivery are necessary conditions for a project to reach energization. They are no longer sufficient ones. A design firm has to finish the drawings, a crew has to build it. Someone certified to sign off on the system has to actually be free to do it. Each of those steps now has its own lead time, and a project schedule that only accounts for the first two is not a real schedule. Sustainability Soundbites Energy coverage is sponsored by Amazon. Visit the link in our show notes to learn more about Amazon's spotlight on energy. For sponsorship opportunities with Environment and Energy Leader, please reach out to a member of our team.